The game has already begun. We have Grandmaster Srinath Narayanan on our screens. He's playing at the second anniversary ChessBase India Chess Club tournament at the Phoenix Marketcity Mall. And his opponent is IM Nubairshah Shaikh. And Nubair arrives in a hurry. He was a bit late to the game. It's 15 minutes plus 2 seconds increment. Nubair is a very strong IM, very soon to be a GM. Srinath, of course, one of the finest trainers in the country, but also a strong chess player. Nubair calms himself down, just like how Magnus Carlsen does, even after reaching late to the board, adjusts all his pieces, brings out his knight to f3. Srinath thinks for a bit and plays his pawn to d5. g3, we have the reti on the board, and Srinath goes g6, pawn comes up to c4. And now Srinath is deciding whether to push the pawn, take the pawn, but he decides to protect it with his pawn up to c6. Very solid opening. It's like the Grunfeld and the Slav have come together to play this. Now bishop g2 is one of the most normal moves. You can also play d4, but you see Nubair thinks for a bit and plays b3. Not at all a good move, because now this diagonal is very strong, and Srinath, if he is alert, can immediately take advantage of it, and he does it. He finds the best move, opens up and plays c5, and now you will see this is not easy to meet. The d4 pawn is under pressure. He first defends it. Now you cannot push the pawn still because the bishop would be hanging, so Srinath pushes puts more pressure with his knight. Pawn comes up to e3, and now bishop g4. Nubair is blitzing it out, but the pressure on the center is growing. Now takes. If you take back with the pawn, the problem is you still have this pin happening. The knight is putting pressure. So the most logical thing to do here is to take with the knight, which is what Nubair does. He takes back with the knight, and if you now take here on e2, then queen e2, and if you take here on d4, then after takes, bishop takes, this is a fine position for white. So this is how Nubair wants to wriggle out of the mess. But after bishop h3 played by Srinath, he says your king cannot castle. So very interesting move there by Srinath. You can look at the clock, both players down to 7 minutes. Nubair pins the knight here. Queen d7 is a good move, preparing rook d8, putting pressure here. Now knight comes in, and actually rook d8 would be a fine move here. In fact, there's also knight h6 or knight f6 you can develop. He goes knight h6. Wonderful move here by Srinath, because later the knight can come to f5, putting more pressure in the center. The bishop is protected with rook b1, and Srinath castles. Maybe not the most accurate move. Rook d8 would have been better, keeping this pressure down. But now after castles, there's a chance. He takes. Srinath has to take back with the pawn so as to keep the queens on the board. Bishop g7, good move by Nubair. Now the rook is on the open file. Now f3 would have been a strong move, but he goes bishop f3. This is not the best, because this bishop is a little loose. The knight is a little loose, and this bishop prevents the white king from castling. Rook d8, fantastic move, putting pressure on the knight. Queen comes back. So Nubair in a way has stabilized the position, but I love this move king g8, so that later point there's no check that comes in. Queen comes up to c3. And now how is Srinath going to keep putting pressure? He goes knight to g4. He improves his knight's position, and a blunder here by Nubair. He plays knight e4, but you can see the bishop is now loose, and in fact the queen can jump to f5, hitting the bishop and the pawn, and he finds it. Great move. Now you can't protect this bishop. If you go king e2, there is knight e5 with the knight coming into d3 and the bishop coming into g4. So he goes back, and now Srinath has many options. One of them is to just chop this off and take the bishop, and he's completely winning. You see him calculating with 2 minutes on the clock. Nubair has 22 seconds, and he plays knight e5, another fine move, hitting the bishop, looking for this check, so the bishop can't really move. e4 is maybe a possibility. He goes bishop e4, and now an unbelievable move is at Srinath's disposal. Finds it. What a move. If you take the queen, knight f3 is a checkmate. What a nice move by Srinath. f3 has to be played, but then This is already game over. You can see Nubair shaking his head. A crowd has gathered over there. After all, it's happening inside a mall, so a lot of people following the action. Takes, and now queen takes, but then can white simply take the rook? So is this a mistake by Srinath? Well, it seems he's calculated. Nubair now has 4 seconds, but a check comes in. If the king comes to the first rank, you lose the rook. He goes up. The rook moves in. There's no place for the king to move. You have to give up your queen. Nubair resigns, shakes his head. There's a smile. Srinath knows he's played a fine game of chess. Smile is not very common on Srinath's face, but this game I'm sure he's proud of. He really played a nice one. After all, Nubair is a strong opponent, and with this, Srinath moves to 6 out of 6 in this tournament. He's the only grandmaster, and he's showing why he's the boss.